Well, although we think he'd be the last person to call himself jaded by life in space, our next guest has spent enough time there to, for at least a hint of boredom to set in, more than 140 days, including 3.5 months aboard the Russian space station Mir. For a long time, Norm Thagard works with us now. We're glad to have him with us in Houston to sort through some of the things that have gone on in the last day and a half. Are you surprised at how much we seem to be learning, how quickly we seem to be learning it?
No, because there aren't that many things that can cause what we saw. So you've got visual evidence, you've already got the data coming down. So it's, while it's still fluid and the final answer is not known, some of the pieces of the puzzle already start to come together.
I'm going to come back to that, because is that the essential difference between the two accidents, that one happens at launch when perhaps 1 million things or 1,000 things can go wrong, and the other on re-entry where the possibilities are fewer?
Well, of course, it's more stunning, I think, really on entry because you don't expect it. I always thought, I think like a lot of people did, that the lion's share of the risk is involved on riding that rocket that it takes to get you to orbit. Once you get there, you sort of think you've got the mission made. You do realize that there is an additional risk above that from just being on orbit to the entry, but this is still pretty unexpected.
Do you have a feel for what happened right now? I don't mean a precise answer, but a kind of broad feel for it?
If you follow what Ron Dittemore was telling us at the debrief, it certainly does look like there was a thermal problem in the left wing, that there was also...
Is that the same as a tile problem?
Well, the tiles are part of the thermal protection system. Whether or not it was a tile problem or a damage to a door, whatever it was, there seemed to be a thermal problem, and you couple that with additional drag, and it does seem like there were some structural problems on the outside of the wing causing the excess drag. So those two things do start to at least give you some...
Are those two things related?
Well, they would seem to be. For instance, and not saying it were a tile, but if you had missing tiles, then that would increase the aerodynamic drag, and you would see what you saw with the flight control system trying to counteract that. And depending on where they were, you could also see the sensors doing what they were doing.
I've asked this question a couple of times tonight. Do you think the shuttle itself, as a vehicle, is obsolete?
I don't think the shuttle is obsolete. It was probably obsolescent even when it flew the first time, if for no other reason than the computers on board. They had magnetic core memory, which even by the time the shuttle first flew, largely was being supplanted by other forms of memory and machines with more memory. But it doesn't matter whether it's obsolescent or not. The fact is, sometimes better is the enemy of good. It certainly was good enough for the role for which it was intended and seemed to perform well in that role.
And so, from this, you would not say we need to abandon that vehicle behind us. We just need to figure out what went wrong and make sure it doesn't go wrong again.
Absolutely, because it's the same situation with an automobile. If you've got an automobile that, even though you've had it 10 or 15 years, is still low mileage, it's been well maintained, why would you necessarily junk it? It still works fine, and you can rely on it. On the other hand, if you were going to build a new vehicle at this point in time, you probably wouldn't build the old car, you'd build a new one.
Then why not build the new car? Why not build the new vehicle?
And that's a good question, and that may be exactly what happens now. Now, in 1986, when we lost the Challenger, the shuttle fleet was still young, the program was still young, and it made sense to replace that. Right. Maybe now it makes more sense to move to a newer vehicle.
Just as quickly as you can, do you think that's a legitimate question on the table once this investigation is over?
I'm sure that it is. Do you replace the Columbia, or do you start on a new generation of vehicle?
Thanks for coming by. Thanks for your help this weekend. I think we've all appreciated it very much. Thank you, sir. When we come back, the last time the country went through this, it was President Ronald Reagan who was in office, and the speech he made was truly, for most of us, an unforgettable moment. And so we'll remember that on this sad day. This is Newsnight from Houston. Finally from us tonight, there are moments when an entire country just seems to freeze up solid in fear or shock or grief. And at those moments, we need a shoulder in chief to cry on, or a backbone in chief for courage, whatever it takes. It's often the hardest job for a president. History remembers those who do it well. We leave you tonight with a president and a speech history already remembers as one of the best of its kind.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd planned to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union. But the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss. 19 years ago, almost to the day, we lost 3 astronauts in a terrible accident on the ground. But we've never lost an astronaut in flight. We've never had a tragedy like this. And perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle. But they, the Challenger 7, were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly. We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista Mikaloff. We mourn their loss as a nation together. The families of the 7, we cannot bear, as you do, the full impact of this tragedy. But we feel the loss, and we're thinking about you so very much. Your loved ones were daring and brave, and they had that special grace, that special spirit that says, give me a challenge, and I'll meet it with joy. They had a hunger to explore the universe and discover its truths. They wished to serve, and they did. They served all of us. We've grown used to wonders in this century. It's hard to dazzle us. But for 25 years, the United States space program has been doing just that. We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we'll continue to follow them. I've always had great faith in and respect for our space program, and what happened today does nothing to diminish it. We don't hide our space program. We don't keep secrets and cover things up. We do it all up front and in public. That's the way freedom is, and we wouldn't change it for a minute. We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, more teachers in space. Nothing ends here. Our hopes and our journeys continue. I want to add that I wish I could talk to every man and woman who works for NASA or who worked on this mission and tell them your dedication and professionalism have moved and impressed us for decades, and we know of your anguish. We share it. There's a coincidence today. On this day, 390 years ago, the great explorer Sir Francis Drake died aboard ship off the coast of Panama. In his lifetime, the great frontiers were the oceans, and a historian later said he lived by the sea, died on it, and was buried in it. Well, today, we can say of the Challenger crew, their dedication was, like Drake's, complete. The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us for the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them, this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God. Thank you.
17 years ago. Good to have you with us tonight. We're back here in Houston tomorrow and Tuesday for the memorial service. The President will be here. We hope you will be as well. I'm Aaron Brown. Good night for all of us at Newsnight.